This is my story of how I took down my terrible neighbor Karen for vandalizing my car. I fought back with my lawyer, and what she did was a shock to me. So, Karen had always been a neighbor of mine, living just a few houses down the street. We'd cross paths occasionally, but we were never particularly close. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was jealous of my house and the life that I'd built for myself. My home was my pride and joy. It was a place that I'd worked hard to make as comfortable and beautiful as possible. I had recently acquired a new car, one that I'd been dreaming of for years. It was a sleek, shiny, and powerful machine, and I absolutely loved it. Well, as it turned out, Karen had always wanted a car just like mine, but couldn't afford it. She had also been envious of my house, which was bigger and more impressive than her own. Her jealousy became really intense, and she could not stand just seeing me living my best life. Instead of working to improve her own situation, she decided to take a destructive route. How sad is that? Anyway, one early afternoon, I was relaxing in my living room. I was watching TV when I heard a loud crash outside. It scared me to death, so I rushed over to the window. I wanted to see what had happened. My heart absolutely sank as I saw the source of the commotion. There was Karen, standing beside my brand new car, a sledgehammer in her hands. She was slamming it into the car with a primal rage that I just had never seen before. The loud, sickening thuds echoed throughout the neighborhood as she mercilessly attacked my beautiful ride. I could not believe my eyes, and a surge of that same primal rage that she had, mixed with disbelief, coursed through my veins. My feet moved before my mind could catch up, and I stormed outside, shouting at Karen, demanding to know what on earth she was doing. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with hate and madness. Her lips curled into a sly grin, as if she had achieved some sort of twisted victory. "You think you're so much better than everyone else with your fancy house and that car," she sneered. "I can't stand it anymore, so I thought I'd teach you a lesson." In a blind rage, I grabbed my phone and began recording her. She continued to bash my car with the sledgehammer, completely oblivious to the fact that she was being captured on video. In a way, her arrogance actually helped me, as her sinister grin was undeniable evidence of her actions. When she had finally had her fill of destruction, she dropped the sledgehammer and began to walk away, thinking that she got away with her crime. But she had no idea that her wicked deed had been caught on camera. Well, there's more. Once I was sure that she was gone, I rushed inside and reviewed the footage. Her face, filled with malice and glee as she destroyed my car, sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to do something about this. I had to expose her for the criminal that she was. So what did I do? I decided to take the evidence to the police. Wouldn't have you? It wasn't an easy decision, as I knew it would likely lead to a confrontation with my neighbor. And I hate confrontation. I try to avoid it whenever I can because it's just so uncomfortable. But I couldn't just let her get away with such a blatant act of destruction, especially when I had the proof. It did hurt to record, but I knew I had to do it. I walked into the local police station, I presented the video footage, and I recounted the entire incident. The officer on duty was shocked at the clear evidence that I'd provided. He assured me that they would do everything in their power to bring Karen to justice. With the police now involved, I knew it was only a matter of time before they tracked Karen down. Her careless actions had left her exposed and vulnerable, and she was about to learn that you can't escape the consequences of your actions. You can only run for so long, but you can't hide, Karen. A few days later, the police located Karen and brought her in for questioning. She was caught completely off guard, unable to comprehend how her plan had unraveled so quickly. When confronted with the hard evidence, she had no choice but to confess to her actions. How could you not? She was charged with malicious destruction of property and arrested on the spot. With Karen in police custody, I felt a sense of relief and justice, but the ordeal was far from over. The damage to my car was extensive, and I had no choice but to contact my insurance company to assess the situation. And we all know dealing with insurance sucks. The insurance adjuster arrived to inspect the wreckage and estimated the cost of the repairs. Unfortunately, the damage was so severe that the car was deemed a total loss. While I was devastated by the loss of my dream car, I was grateful for insurance, which would cover the cost for a replacement. A few weeks later, I received a check from my insurance company to cover the cost of a new car. It was a bittersweet moment, as the car I had loved was gone, and you just can't replace sentimental value. But at least I was getting a fresh start, right? I began the process of shopping for a new vehicle, trying to put the traumatic incident behind me. However, the consequences for Karen were just beginning to unfold. She was facing legal charges, and I wasn't even about to let her off the hook easily. Can you blame me? I decided to file a civil lawsuit against her, seeking compensation not only for the damage to my car, but also for the time and stress that this incident had caused me. I hired a lawyer who specialized in personal injury and property damage cases. He meticulously reviewed the evidence and began building a case against Karen. He was confident that we had a strong chance of winning, especially given the clear video evidence of her actions. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I wanted to hold Karen accountable for what she had done and ensure that justice was served. My lawyer and I arrived at the courthouse and ready to present our case. As the proceedings began, my lawyer presented the video footage, which left the judge and jury in shock. It was clear that Karen had committed a malicious act of destruction out of envy and spite. The courtroom was filled with tension, and it was evident that Karen's actions were indefensible. There is one very important thing that I have to mention. As the trial continued, it became clear that Karen was nowhere to be found. She had failed to appear in court, which was a huge mistake on her part. The judge issued a warrant for her arrest, and the case proceeded without her presence. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me compensation for the damage to my car and the emotional distress that I'd endured. The judgment also included punitive damages to deter Karen and others from similar acts of vandalism in the future. With the court's decision in my favor, I felt a sense of closure and justice. Karen had been held accountable for her actions, and I had received compensation for the damage to my car and the time that I had spent dealing with the aftermath of her destructive act. The legal consequences didn't stop there for Karen. Her failure to appear in court did lead to her arrest, and she faced additional charges for her evasion of the law. She was ultimately sentenced to probation, community service, and offered to pay restitution for the damages, which were all well-deserved, mind you. The entire incident had a profound impact on Karen's entire life. Not only had she lost her freedom and been ordered to pay for her destructive actions, but her reputation in the community was irreparably tarnished. She had gone from being envious of my life to being pitied and shunned by those around her. Karen's jealousy and spite had only brought her misery and misfortune. She'd underestimated the power of evidence and the consequences of her actions. I had not only gotten a new car, but also the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. Life went on, and I continued to enjoy the comfort of my home and the thrill of driving my new car. I also made a few upgrades to my security system to ensure that no one would ever dare to trespass on my property again. The incident with Karen would always serve as a reminder that envy and spite could lead to one's own undoing, and that justice would ultimately prevail. Naval officer didn't want to live with enlisted, gets fired, posted by I Love Boba 43. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard on the news how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Now, I did find out this is not a private letter, and he did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. So for example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers, and 2 are for officers since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what's allowed. If there's limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put wherever there is space. So, our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some of the quotes in his letter, and yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happens in enlisted housing. There are also assaults sexually and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives on enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officer wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are drug users, PERS, criminals, etc. The kicker? He was an enlisted army member before going to officer school. So in civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent alcoholics, drug users, etc. based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and, maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life by denying days off, making you stay late, writing you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was ticked, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon, and I figure I'd have some fun before I get out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards, but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went at work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside, and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to be swept under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. Oh, and by the way, the hatchet became a symbol of enlisted deviance because in his letter, he stated that two gangs were attacking each other with hatchets and other weapons at an enlisted housing unit. Now this comment says that I remember when this got international press attention. All the Navy said was he had been disciplined but would not release details. And OP said that he found out from buddies who were stationed there when it all went down, and angry cops did a follow-up. Kevina teacher meets Kevina's student, posted by IsKimGeek. So, I was both a Kevin and encountering a Kevin in this one, and the stupidity on display is in the social skills department on both sides. Some context. My family was military, and so by 3rd grade, I was on my 4th school. I started in a jurisdiction where kids can go to school or preschool from age 3, and my folks opted for school because I was G&T, so it's not as much as it seems. G&T is the gifted and talented program. G&T kids seem to run to two extremes, weird quiet ones, and weird ones who are physically incapable of tolerating boredom or wrongness. Guess which one I was? I'll give you a hint. Once, when I was about 5, my 9-year-old cousin sat on me because my fidgeting was annoying her too much. So I started wiggling my toes and my fingers. And yes, I'm being evaluated as an adult for ADHD. Why do you ask? Anyway, Kevina the teacher, for her part, was the kind of old school teacher that cannot admit an error, penalizes kids for mastering the material by basically putting you in timeout for the rest of the class, and was overall a nasty, cruel bully who shouldn't be in charge of a goldfish, let alone 32 kids between the ages of 7 and 9. We got on about as well as elemental potassium in water, is what I'm saying. YouTube has some cool videos on that if you're not a chemistry type. Back to the story. This is a tale of my first interaction of Kevina and how I managed to start my first period of my first day of my first week of a new grade at a new school with my first ever in-school suspension, setting a new record for speed of getting crap in school in the extended family that stands to this day. First impressions, I'm good at them. So, first period was a bit of a deal because I was young for the grade because of differences in age cutoffs in different regions, and my prematurity I'd effectively skipped a grade, and I was small for my age, so they actually had to get a kindergarten desk brought up because I couldn't see over my desk. Yeah, I was tiny. Eventually, the dust settles with the desk that I can actually use and see over. But by now, the entire class is aware that I'm the weird kid who's too short for a normal desk, and I'm already getting the short joke. Great. So, being my G&T self in a mainstream program for the first time, I'm thinking, I got this. Other programs, it was cool to be good at math, so I just show off my algebra and pre-calculus, and I can recover, right? Current me looking at kid me like, oh honey, no. Ever heard the phrase, for a smart kid, they sure can be stupid? That was me. Book smart, socially oblivious, too impulsive for good judgment. So, the teacher starts the review with addition. I'm a bit insulted. I mean, I'm good at math, but in the old district, mainstream kids started long multiplication in 3rd grade, and 2nd grade material was multiplication and division, and some simple geometry, not addition and subtraction, which was kindergarten and 1st grade material. My thinking was along the lines of, they might not be good at math, but don't call them stupid, teacher. Unfortunately, this sense of being insulted for my classmates doesn't come out. What I say is, in my old school, we did long division. This is too easy. Yeah, I was referred for an ASD assessment the previous year, so that tracks with my childhood social skills. That's autism spectrum disorder. And the teacher replies, well, if it's so easy, you can show the class how to do this one. And she writes 2 times 3 equals on the board. Triumphantly, I say 6. And the teacher says, no, it's not, it's 5. I guess kids at your old school aren't that good at math. She turned back to write another problem. I was shocked. After I recovered my jaw from the floor, I stuttered a bit and finally blurted, that's wrong. The teacher, let me tell you, knew how to turn around ominously. I grew up in an authoritarian household, and I knew it was possible to wash dishes ominously and call someone's name ominously, but not turning around. That was new. Excuse me, what was that, dear? This wasn't the dear of a sweet older lady talking to a kid. This was a saccharine, fake sweet Atlantic Canada dear that can mean anything you want it to. And right now, it meant a string of profane insults so long it'll probably hit the word limit. Think how US Southerners can say F you, you stupid idiot, with a, oh bless your heart, that kind of dear. And bless my socially oblivious little heart, I didn't pick up what she was putting down. 2 times 3 isn't 5. That'd be 2 plus 3. 2 times 3 is 6. A reasonable adult would admit the error and move on, even if I was being a right little pastor about it. Not Kavina. No, the answer is 5. That's final. A socially savvy kid would have recognized that tone and dropped it. Not me. No, I had the bit in my teeth. She was wrong, and I couldn't just let her sit in her wrongness, being wrong at me. This wouldn't stand. She's a teacher. She's supposed to know better. Why are you being stupid about this? Excuse me? A teacher should know the difference between addition and multiplication, miss. You're wrong, and I can prove it. I stood up from my desk. I am not wrong, she said as she stalked towards me and my desk. You're new, and you want to make an impression on the class, but this isn't the way to do it. She pushed me back into my chair and continued. You will sit and not say another word if you want to not spend the rest of your first day in the office. Smugly, she turned to return to the board. But I had spent 7 years mastering the ability to walk quiet enough to avoid my father's rage, and she was wrong. This wrongness couldn't be tolerated. I followed her. She didn't notice until I was drawing on the board. I drew 2 sets of 3 lines and circled each. To the class, I said, 2 3s is 6, and I counted the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. Then I drew a pair of lines and another set of 3 and circled each. To the class, I announced, 2 plus 3 is 5. I counted the 5 lines one by one, stabbing my chalk into the board each time, and the last one I did hard enough that the chalk broke. I looked her in the face, speaking with the blunt, brutal honesty of a socially inept child with no filter. I said, you're wrong. If you don't know the difference, should you really be teaching us? Maybe you should be in 3rd grade math and I can teach math. And that was when she grabbed me by the collar and dragged me to the office. It set the tone for our relationship and remains one of my funniest memories from the 3rd grade. HOA takedown. HOA destroys my property, but I'm not even part of the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss this crazy fallout, and I'll see you there.